Okay, whoa, it's playing on my TV. Hold on a second.
Oh, is it? Okay, let me check my.
Right. Well, that was exciting. That countdown got me really excited.
Oh, there we go. How do we check if people are in or?
So if you're on YouTube, and I think there's
Oh, I
some
see the
people
YouTube
now who are
archive.
tuned in,
Oh, wow.
you can see there are some people here. So hello everyone, welcome to our workshop. Um, we will wait a couple of minutes just for people to roll in, and then we'll start with some introductions, and then I can explain the structure of today's event with you guys. So if you guys are tuned in right now, leave a comment. Let us know where you are in the world, who you are, because we probably will know some of you. Just so we can see, because this is a global event. It's amazing. The turnout's been crazy.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah, this has been super successful. Let us know if you've been enjoying it, which event you guys have been enjoying the most. And in a couple of minutes, we will start the introductions and whatnot. Eric,
Sounds. Yeah.
how have you been?
I know. I've been well. I've been busy. Not too bad, but yeah, still in lockdown. Obviously, I'm working from home is different.
Yeah, I can
And,
imagine.
how
But
about yourself?
you're juggling a lot of things, man. So you're teaching and you're working and you're doing other freelance stuff as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Keeping myself busy during this period. But undoubtedly, I'm sure you're equally busy with your podcast and as well. And
Don't you host the host? No, host away. Obviously I am, because of hosting the podcast. Yeah, I can easily be in host mode. But today, hopefully, I can give you guys some insights as well behind my drawings. Cool. Some of the comments coming in. Blessing says you've gained 120 subscribers in 2 days. Congrats. Exactly, Blessing. We were just talking about that. It's been absolutely nuts to see the growth that's come from this massive convention, and it just shows us that what will happen in the future is going to be even more crazy. Um, so super excited, and I'd say kind of congrats to you guys for being the first cohort. You guys will be the official first people who came to the MADCon 2021, and we'll do loads more hopefully. Jamil Dossa says, super excited for this, more than happy to miss the Arsenal and City game. Oh no,
what?
how dare we? Jamil, we really appreciate the dedication here, mate. Cool. All right. Well, I'll get started now with some introductions just so you guys have a bit of context. So, welcome everyone. I am Hamza Shaikh. I am the host and producer of the Two Worlds Design podcast. I'm also a part two and partner at Make Architects in London, and also a co-founding member of the Mad Collective. So it is, yeah, it's my great pleasure to be here, not just as a host for this event, but also to also share my work with you guys and share some value with you too. So, Eric, why don't you give everyone a quick introduction?
Yeah, I'm Eric. I graduated in 2016, and I'm currently a practicing architect and a design teacher. And on the side, I work on a bit of concept art and illustration.
Yeah, I mean, guys, let me give you a bit more juice about Eric. Eric is one of the most inspiring illustrators and students and professionals in architecture I've ever met. He's become a bit of a friend, and I'm super proud of the stuff he's doing for the profession. He's doing huge things. He's also won countless medals and awards for his drawings. So, just to be clear, he is the master here. I am a novice when it comes to drawing and things like that. So, but what I can say is I'm a serial obsessive curious person. So when it comes to sharing insights, I hopefully have some value to share with you guys as well.
Undoubtedly.
Cool. Okay, so if you guys are ready, we will get straight into the presentation. Eric, why don't you share your screen and you can just start going through what you've prepared. I will say quickly while you're loading it to people, the aim of this event is, as it's called, drawing surgery, is to kind of really start to deconstruct and analyze the kind of the myths behind some fantastical drawings or crazy drawings that I think a lot of people see and they feel sometimes they feel a bit uneasy, like how the beep am I going to create something like that? How the hell am I even capable of doing something like that? So we are talking about the kind of showpiece drawings and the type of drawings that have taken many years to do, because I think Eric will agree that those are the types of drawings that we get most requests about. So this, we thought this would be a great kind of long form event to explain the myths behind the drawings.
Definitely. Can you see my screen, or do you only see a screensaver?
It's flashing between the two. I can see your presentation now.
Okay, great, thank you. So, should I get started, or?
Yeah, get started. And guys, leave your comments during the presentation. Eric, if you see a comment or if I see a comment that's about the presentation, we can interject. Otherwise, we will definitely be taking some questions at the end for about half an hour, depending on the questions we get. So yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Sounds exciting. So I'm going to break down just 3 of my drawings that I've developed during my 5th year back in 2016. This was for my master's project. It was called Cohesion, Blueprint for United Kingdom. And you'll start to see the layers of them, from the line drawings through to color to the embellishment of the proposal and narrative. So this here is the base for one of my drawings. You can see that there's key elements modeled from the architectural proposal that's developed throughout the year. Tectonic moments, high road, housing, and another piece of architecture, which are these crossing gates. So this is the base model where I really just try to capture some key architectural spaces. What do I want to tell, and what do I want to add to this drawing as well? What sort of environment and atmosphere do I want it to really encapsulate? And then I start to employ a level of color, hinting at what sort of feel I want this drawing to have, and what time of day it's set, and what kind of time throughout the year it is. So this is a sort of nighttime shot. And in it, I've added some base colors, and the key highlight here is the high street with the later embellishment that we've seen in the next slide. And here you see that the key colors I've used are sort of dark blue, a sort of pale yellow, and white. And
Eric, I'm just going to quickly interject. Sorry, so if you go back to your first image, so this is your line drawing, right?
Yes, correct.
Did you get this from a 3D model, or did you get it from, does this involve actual CADing, kind of 2D CADing?
So this is from a 3D model. It's worked up in a fairly old school CAD program called MicroStation. But any other programs such as SketchUp or Rhino will equally do the same thing. It's about modeling and then exporting those 3D lines. And the reason why I did it in MicroStation was because it handles large models pretty well when modeled cleanly. Lines come out fairly quickly, which gives me more time to do more drawings and to actually model more within the drawing to give it more content without actually having the complete model really struggle and to go through other alternatives.
So the process here is you spend quite a lot of time in the model making world, if you like, and then you make sure you find your kind of killer view. Is that right?
I think throughout the year you spend a lot of time really developing the architecture for the view to really come alive to begin with. Then you think about what you want to say about the view, and then you sketch it out. I think sketch is always really important to sort of develop and find and to clarify your thoughts before you commit to the drawing. and then you adjust your drawing and your model and your views accordingly to what you really want to, the spirit of the drawing to say.
Right. And then from this process to the next, I was just seeing a question coming from Justina, who said, "Did you apply the color through Photoshop?"
Yes, so this is where you switch programs and Photoshop becomes king. Where you do commit to everything in Photoshop, and it's just like a color book, right? Where you start filling in the lines, filling in those spaces. Alternatively, you can always put your color ID onto your model where it makes it a lot easier to fill in the moments. But as you can see, I didn't really use that because I was having a base set of colors, which was free colors for certain moments.
Awesome. So yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so there's kind of freaky tones, and I wanted to really use that color precisely to distinguish between certain things. You've got a sort of artificial light which is occurring, as you can see by the yellow dim light along the high street, and a sort of natural light, as you can see by the moonlight in the background. And then everything else that is meant to be fairly dark is lit up in a dark blue. And I feel that usually when you use color, like in a darker tone as opposed to black, like a dark brown, a dark gray, a dark blue, really helps to unify the base setting of the proposal.
Sorry, we're just getting a comment in about your audio, Eric.
Oh no.
I was hearing that too, but I thought it was just my audio. Is there a way you can quickly change your sound input? I mean, if you have headphones, you could pop the headphones in with an inbuilt microphone, possibly.
Sadly, do not. Let me check.
Yeah. Thanks, Rocky, for letting us know. It's always good to kind of get the get the audience to tell us what's going on.
Thank you, Lucky. Appreciate that. And then you can let me know.
Sure.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh wait,
I can hear you well. Yeah, keep talking. If you,
can everyone else hear me well?
I think so far it should be good. If you continue with this, if we hear any problems, we'll let you know.
Great. Is this a lot clearer for you compared to before?
It is for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, great. So should I continue?
Yes.
Okay, great. And yeah, so that sets the base setting for the color. So from the line work to the color into, thank you, Blessing. Into the proposal here. So you can see that this is about adding the key element to this drawing, which is about the chandeliers as part of this highway, about lighting up this high street. And it's more about the architecture that starts to really inform the proposal. So here you see inspiration from Leeds Town Hall. So it's about this notion of accessing local needs. And then here the architecture takes inspiration from the spires in Oxford. It's about this notion of knowledge. And this is what this kind of Tectonic really embraces and encapsulates. And you can really see that by also drawing in inhabitants and people, because you can have a crowd of people surrounding certain speakers. So this is very inspired by like Speaker's Corner and those notions of those ladders. You can also have one person listen to one person's view or a very scarce amount. So giving a drawing space and knowing when to really fill it up is also important in the placement of people and also in the placement of your architecture and spaces. And you can see a very busy high street down the middle, and also people dancing, listening, speaking, etc. And so you can see that this sets the base of the proposal. This kind of sets the mood and the tonal quality and what kind of architecture I wanted to put into context. So I've got the housing, the high street, this sort of urban ring, and another tectonic in the background with everything set into context, which you'll see if the portfolio was ever shown with the master plan. And then you really embellish this with the proposal here. So this is this drawing, and I don't know if anyone has any particular questions about this drawing before I move on to the next.
There is one by Blessing. He says, due to the flat color used, why did you opt to use Photoshop instead of Illustrator, which can be scaled?
The flat color, why did I use Illustrator? Why did I use Photoshop instead of Illustrator?
Yeah.
I don't actually have a particular reason or answer for that. I just I just I guess I was comfortable in Photoshop and the use of it that I just went straight in, and I thought everything else can be worked through that program.
Yeah, I mean, if I would quickly add to that as well, I think using Illustrator for a drawing this size and this detailed, it would be a very, very heavy file just from a technical standpoint, because Illustrator is using vectors. I think if you're using Photoshop and you're just coming in with the raster pixels of the color, you're going to be using a lot less memory. And if I'm not mistaken, Eric, these drawings are elephant size, aren't they? Which is
Yes.
bigger than A0.
Yeah, thanks for the Hamza. Yeah, they are extremely large. They're in real life they're a quad elephant size. That's what they call it, the paper type, and it's it's like 1.3 meters by about 1 meter in size. So if I zoom in, hopefully, you start to see some of the details and the additional moments in it. So there is a layer of hatch. There is tonal qualities that you add back on in terms of shadow and depth to a person, shadow on the ground, additional hatch moments, different shades of color, people. So when you really zoom in, you can see the additional embellishments to the drawing. Let it to be confetti to celebrate, to denote the notion of celebration, or light particles floating up, because these are solar collectors. And yeah, I think all the little details really count towards that.
Definitely. And with this level of detail, just to kind of make that point emphasized, using Illustrator would just be impossible in terms of the
Agreed.
file size. Yeah.
Yeah, because the amount of lines in it, like you mentioned, is and the size of the paper makes it very heavy. Agreed.
Aria Williams asks Eric, what do you mean by tectonic?
Oh, Tectonic is just defining the architectures that I've developed in the proposal. So I'll call this chandelier piece a tectonic development in my proposal, and so would this piece, and so would this piece, and so would the housing in the background.
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Do carry on.
Thank you. So moving on. This is just another example of another drawing here. So you can see the line work is very scarce. There's not much of it, and there's not much in the ground. But what I really wanted to express was the underside of this tectonic piece, which is the gardener, which you can see kind of looks like an aristocrat with its shoulder pads and a drape. And the reason why I chose this view was because I wanted to focus on the ground level and to focus on the activity down below. But also I wanted to embrace the context of the master plan, showing that these are the rest of the architectures and so on and so forth along this mound, which I'll explain very shortly. But you can see the clarity in the line that it's very simple models. You can see that they're attaching moments into the mound, and everything else gets added into Photoshop, surprisingly. This is about setting the tonal quality of it. So I wanted it to have this very summery green vibe to it. And I wanted to focus on the foreground and the ground level of the greenery, the topiary, and the garden. So this was much about the garden. And this title of this drawing is called New Hyde Park. And here you can start to see that I've started to draw in these very more organic moments compared to the very stiff and scarce model, and started to really go, okay, this is the tonal quality I wanted to embrace. These are the greens and these are the warm colors within this proposal.
Eric, how do you get your color palette for a vision like this? Is it trial and error, or do you have a set color palette that you kind of specified beforehand?
That's a really good question. I think that with color in particular, I think color is quite hard sometimes to use and to do, but it was definitely a turning point in my proposal because it was the one key thing that was raised in my crit, that color can be used very specifically to highlight certain aspects of your proposal, to give it a richer layer. And the way I chose color was that I started to look at key references that I really enjoyed, that I really loved, and also relevant references that really helped to inform the proposal. Not particular to this drawing, I have another drawing that I really referenced the colors by Lowry, who did amazing paintings of sort of British landscapes, and he romanticized that. And I kind of used that color and borrowed from him to really evoke that in one of my other drawings. But this one here, I borrowed from cinematographers, from graphic artists, illustrators that really had a good grasp on color. And I think it's not just about what colors you choose. I also think it's about the proportion of color you give to a page, because a drawing that has 90% green, 10% red is completely different to a drawing that has 90% red, 10% green, right?
Awesome.
Thank you. So going from line to creating the mood, this is the drawing, and
Nice.
also purely in Photoshop. So this is about really embracing the activities that exist within the proposal. Also adding in all of the flora and fauna that exists within the city, wherever they're growing strawberries or raspberries, or wherever the topiaries are cut up. You add your shade, your shadow, the activities that are happening in and around it, wherever pies are being made, or what sort of animals exist in and around. This is a very local Mancunian goat in Isle of Man. And yeah, so I think it's also about adding those small details, such as a lining of pie logos underneath the cape to denote that this is what this Tectonic produces and makes. Because the reason why I denoted that, and people go, "Oh, actually, Eric is a pie in the sky drawing," but I really wanted to focus on the ground view, but I didn't want to take away from the fact that this particular piece of architecture also produced pies and also has a kitchen within it, where the kitchen exists up here. And you can see the chimney here. And to denote that it's a kitchen, we'd, well, in this drawing, I denoted the notion of smell to show that something's cooking. I had a different change of cloud to denote puffs of smoke. And then I had pies falling out from the top to show that the pies were being made from this particular kitchen. So that despite, moments where this might look like fluff or additional things just to embellish the drawing, they're actually, to a degree, a fair level of information that I wanted the reader to look at and to think about, even down to the detail of, yes, they are pies, but where is the pie made? So this is the logo of the Isle of Man, but also here the pie is shaped in the British flag, so that there's very small details here and there that sort of suggest certain things, and then you have dotted lines over here to suggest that these sort of graze this sort of mountain of food. And then you've also got here that music is being played in this city, and that's also being expressed. So sound, smell, flora, fauna, all the intangible moments can also be expressed in the drawing, which I feel really adds a different layer to a proposal and to what you're trying to tell in your narrative. And also variation and variety. So I didn't use the same topiary twice or 3 times. Occasionally there are drawings that using the same thing over and over again gives a different layer and depth. But here I want to show that people are still trimming the topiary, and then there's the notion and wit of the queen. So there's also a bit of humor and wit in the drawing as well. Before I move on, is there any questions that's been asked, or should I answer any that's
Yeah,
been
there's
coming through?
quite a lot of questions. I think what we'll do is the ones that are a bit more generic, we'll ask, because they're all amazing questions. We can ask some of them at the end. But on this particular drawing, there was one on characters. It says, yeah, so how do you get people that fit the exact perspective of the drawing? Did you draw them yourself?
So the characters are very much borrowed from, so I think the use of people is very particular to the type of project you might develop. So my project was very much to do with the United Kingdom and the UK and Britain. And so I wanted to borrow from British artists and illustrators and graphic designers. So these characters are very much borrowed from them and in the spirit of that kind of wit, such as Heath Robinson, etc. So these characters were then traced over and placed back in. And yes, there are moments where they might not seem like they fit the drawing, or they do, and you do have to manipulate that in Photoshop. And then that's how the characters were chosen, defined, and shaped. And you can always, borrow different stances and actions of different people from Google, and then trace them over yourself, and still be able to keep it in the spirit of that kind of drawing style.
Definitely. Thanks, Widuri. I'll also add, Eric, there's an amazing thing we used to do at university where if you're trying to do a very specific pose for a character, but you can't find it on Google, sometimes the best thing to do is just do the pose yourself, get someone to take a photo of you, or get your friend to do a pose and take a photo of them and trace that. And you can end up with some super unique characters that way.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Or even 3D people on whatever platform you're using, whether it's Enscape or SketchUp or the warehouse or wherever it might be. There are people in different positions. Although it's a very mesh model, you can always use that as a base to trace over as well.
Yeah.
So should I move on?
Yep.
So as you can see, this next drawing is also very sparse. There's nothing much on it or to it. But I wanted the foreground to be about this post box. And in the background, you can very much see the high street, one of the drawings I spoke about earlier, with the chandeliers, the very first drawing I spoke about. And then you can also see the mountain, which I spoke about in the previous drawing, to do with the garden, New Hyde Park. And you probably wouldn't notice this in this drawing because it's such a simple model in that sense. But it's about, how do you really use your model to the best of your ability, and what do you want to highlight? So I think when you're defining a drawing, you need to think about what you're trying to say and what's important to your story and your narrative to express in a series of drawings, because you can't always capture everything in one. So the focus here is very much the post box. And this kind of tectonic is very much to do with sending all the resources that was collected in the city from the solar energy in the first drawing to the food and the fruits and everything in the previous drawing, and to send it back to the rest of the United Kingdom, to the rest of the capital cities. That was what I wanted to demonstrate in this drawing towards the end of the day. So there's two things that kind of start to define the color of this: the color of the post box being red, and the idea of being the end of the day being sunset. So very much in my head, I had this very sunset ready feel to the drawing, which I wanted to define. And that's the kind of the mood I set. And this was the base for that drawing. So you've got a very sharp, hard red at the bit front, and then it kind of fades out towards the back into a sort of distant sunset. And here you can see the focus is on the mailbox and the people inside it. And then the following bit is about actually, how is this stuff collected and brought to these mailboxes, and where do they get sent back to? How is that really expressed in this drawing? Like the idea of sending something back to the rest of the United Kingdom. And this is the build-up of the drawing. So this is very much a mixture of what happens in the city, mixed with a sort of conceptual, metaphoric representation of what it does. So it's adding a level of impossibility to it, but still expressing the narrative very clearly, and also adding just a level of humor to it. So compared to the last drawing, you can see that the poor postman is very lonely. But if we zoom in, we will see that he now has a series of picture frames. He's collecting his letters, he's sorting his letters. He's got a little window to look out, and inside is actually a small scaled down model of this mail cannon tower back here. And in it, these are some of my early portfolio sheets that really express the tectonic. So this was within the portfolio, developing the architecture and plan and section and what it does and how it's inhabited and et cetera, et cetera. And this was another early drawing expressing sort of toolkit to provide for the city. And then here, there's very specific emails, addresses in which this is going to be sent back to. The places it's going to be sent back to. So I've kind of just highlighted key icons such as St. Paul's Cathedral, which everyone kind of can identify with, and then also the Samson and Goliath cranes in Belfast. So these were key icons that I borrowed from in terms of developing some of this architecture and to suggest it in the background. They're not in its geographical place location, but they are there to suggest that this is the place that everything here collected goes back to. So it's a metaphorical piece of information that adds another layer to this narrative. Same with the letters and the seals, and also the guards on paper planes flying back is also a metaphorical representation. But also,
Can we zoom into the guards flying on the paper planes? I love this.
But I also wanted to add another little detail. The project is called Cohesion, and the position I took in the proposal is, what if cities are united? Because the brief that year was about resilient cities and what makes a city resilient. So even adding a small detail such as paper men holding hands, it's the notion of togetherness, of cohesion and unity, and that's also something I wanted to lightly express in some way, shape, or form very briefly into the drawing.
Let's get closer to the paper plane, guys. Sorry, I really want to see this close up. I'm
not sure how much closer we're going to get, but let's not get too close, right?
Oh, love it.
But yeah, so I think it's about adding that level of detail to your narrative and story to really express certain things. So here you can see that they have the guards carrying pies and clean water, and it's being checked before it gets taken up the mail cannons and sent back. Oh, sorry. And then you see the rest of the tectonics in the background. You see the houses, the high street, the guard gates, and the cannons are the main thing in this composition, which is why the base drawing, if I go back, you can see that being the focus, and then it's about defining that tonal quality, and then adding all the layers of information that add to the story. And I think those are the only 3 drawings that I would like to talk about today before my time runs out, because Hamza will share some of his amazing work coming up as well, so I can't wait to see that.
Nothing compared to this.
But yeah, that's me for now. Hopefully perfectly on time. And yeah, I think we'll take questions towards the end. Is that right?
Yeah, I think if people have specific questions, then for these drawings, then we'll ask them. But if they're more generic, I think we can mass tackle them at the end. So I'm just going through them quickly. I just quickly put up Audi X comment, really funny. It says 0 to 100 real quick. That's definitely something I was thinking. So P the Great asked, would it be possible to see some of the 3DM, not just the exported lines? Yeah, no, I think we're just showing the drawings and deconstructing them. Perhaps, yeah, Eric, to show, if you wanted to see the 3D model, I think we can try to maybe arrange that somehow later. But yeah, no, unfortunately, we're just showing the 2D line work today. Yeah, I think so. For example, okay, there's one. How did you create your line drawings, and what software did you use? We've already kind of answered that, but just to quickly touch on it again.
Yep, the line drawings were done in a CAD-based program called MicroStation, but I don't think it's very much used anymore. However, Rhino and SketchUp and other similar programs can do similarly amazing things, which is just the pure export of line work anyway.
Also, I think a quick question by Emily is, how do you draw every shadow and highlights? Are they all hand drawn, or do you use lighting in the models for that?
I think the lighting and the shadow in the model helps define the architecture, whereas when it comes to the additional levels of information for the people or the additional letters, whatever it might be in the drawing, then it's all hand drawn purely in Photoshop and by eye and just purely hand drawn. I think the thing to quickly express is that, like, as long as you put time and care and love into a drawing and really think about what you're trying to say and what additional information you can add, it'll become a beautiful drawing, and also a beautiful piece of like architecture, hopefully, in what you're trying to express.
Dima Saka says, do you have a set of references you look at before starting a drawing? Where do you get your inspiration from? I think, Eric, you have some inspirational kind of slides as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh no, not in this one. No.
Oh, it's not. Oh, you took them out.
Sorry. Yeah.
We can go through those at the end if we have time. Unless you can quickly beam it up now.
I don't have it at hand at the moment, but
oh, don't worry.
Yeah.
We can go through that at the end if we have time. But it's a good question, Dina. Okay, cool. I think there's loads of good questions there by Diana, by Blessing, by Shankar, by Justina and Sage. We will get to your questions, and Tahir. We'll get to your questions because they're generic, but they're also very good questions. We'll get to them at the end. I will show my presentation now. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Incredible.
Thank you very much.
Stick around.
Thank you, everyone.
Before we move on, we interrupt this program with a quick ad break sponsored by us. Yeah, us. Guys, if you're watching this, and a lot of you hopefully have already subscribed to the YouTube channel, if you haven't, and you're watching this far, you have no excuse. Subscribe to the Mad Collective channel. There's been a lot of effort put into this, and it's been incredibly kind of global. We've had kind of global kind of coverage on this. It's amazing. So yeah, guys, go and press the subscribe button, which should be right next to you. We're gonna wait 30 seconds for that, and in the meantime, I'm gonna hum a song. Eric, your work is mind-blowing by Justina.
Thank you, Justina.
Thanks, Blessing. I know you're already subscribed. Good. Thank you. Thank you for subscribing. Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Sorry for annoying you, but that is important. And the other thing, if you guys look in the description, you can find Eric's Instagram and my Instagram, and you can follow us whenever you feel like it. We both regularly post drawings. Cool. So I'm going to share my stuff now. Eric's work was incredible in the sense that he showed so much narrative, and I think to kind of inspire you guys to be in the starting point of creating drawings, to have the foundations, you have to kind of, I would suggest you go back and listen to Eric's presentation again and take notes, and also make note of any questions you guys have for the end of this. My presentation is going to be a little bit more on the technical side of things, because I know a lot of you will be very curious about specifically how you do things technically. So I'll show you a quick presentation, but also at the end I'll show you a example Photoshop file setup, which kind of brings in all these complexities and compositional layers, to kind of give you an idea about that. Eric, if you see any interesting questions, could you let me know in the comments? You're on mute, but I think you said yes. Brilliant. Yeah, if you see anything, just unmute yourself and let me know.
Of course. Sorry.
Okay. Can you see my screen, Eric?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, guys. So my presentation is going to go through some of the drawings that I find I get a lot of questions on. It's also worth saying that I have been, there's also a link in the YouTube description linking to my podcast episode with Eric, because as you guys might know, I'm the host and producer of the Two Worlds Design podcast, where Eric was actually our third guest, and we went through some deep narrative insights and basically what we're doing here today, but in a long form conversational style with a lot of tips that you can check out. And it was actually following that podcast episode that he inspired the crap out of me, and I went off and tried to do my own version and my own style of drawing. So yeah, thank you to Eric again for inspiring me and helping me get the best out of my drawings too. So yeah, so these are some of the drawings that I get a lot of questions about, so I will quickly go through. So it says showpiece drawings because what I'm trying to convey today is we are very much talking about showpiece drawings, the types of drawings that will take very, very long for you to do. They will take a lot of care and love, as Eric said. These aren't the types of drawings that you're going to pull off in one day. Hell no. These are the types of drawings that take weeks, months to do. So that's very important to just say off the bat. Expect a long journey with these things. It involves a lot of patience. The other key thing about these drawings is that it's all about selling a narrative. It's all about finding what you're trying to say with your project. What is the story? What is the political what is the political statement you're making? And if you guys watch the episode with Eric and I, you can see him kind of expressing all these things to me and blowing my mind, and hopefully yours too, if you go and check that out. So, it's very important you guys find what your narrative is of your project, and you need to be very vigorous with your sketching and figuring out the kind of killer views, if you like. By the way, Eric, I talk very fast and without many breaks. So if there are questions you want to interrupt me, just
I will do. When I see it, I'll do.
So this is another drawing, obviously, that I get a lot of questions about. So another thing it's very important to express is what I've kind of mentioned already, is that there is no easy way to do this. So easy way versus shortcuts. The reason I've said that is because actually they're two very different things. There is no easy way, but there actually are shortcuts. And the fact that you're sat here or standing or running, I don't know how you're consuming this content, the fact that you're here watching this means that you are now going to have an idea of a particular shortcut, which is hopefully kind of learning from everything Eric's telling you and some of the techniques I'm going to share with you today. And the other aspect of this is quite interesting point to say is, we actually zoomed in on Eric's drawings, but he said don't zoom in too quick, too close. I would say the same, perhaps maybe for the same reason or a different one. But there's an interesting notion of being lazy or being intentional, and I think the idea of intentionality is a very interesting thing, which you only start to realize once you're doing very complex drawings. The scope for you to do things intentionally it increases drastically. That might make a bit more sense later. So I'll get into it very quickly. So here's an example of composition or composing a drawing. So for these drawings that are super detailed and you're showing crazy perspectives or crazy kind of visions of architecture and the world and the environment, there's various ways you can do it. I actually came up or decided on this way, which was to essentially compose my drawing of various different multimedia kind of techniques. In the example you're looking at, I had the task I set myself, which was a bloody difficult one, which was to try and draw a refugee camp. Now, a refugee camp, as you can see, is so dense, it's so detailed, and it's such a arduous task, but it was so crucial to me. And I also realized, look, to be very blatant and kind of bold about this, I took pride in the fact that it was a massive challenge. I took pride in the fact that it was a massive challenge meant that not many people were probably going to take on that challenge. So it motivated me more to take on that challenge. And I think this is an underlying theme with all of this, with Eric's work as well. These are difficult tasks. They take time and they take a lot of effort, but it's worth it in the end. Technically, what you're looking at is my drawing on the right. Obviously, it's not the same drawing, but the value of also tracing. There are various things that also come into play with your drawing, but one of the big ones I think you'd be silly to not make the most of is tracing, and remembering that it's not cheating, it's not illegal, it's not pastiche, it's not looked down upon, as long as you're doing it in a tasteful way, in that it's part of your composition. And the beauty of tracing is you can start to make details unique. You can start to introduce your own aspects to your drawing. The other aspect to kind of creating these crazy drawings is, I showed you the kind of this is all hand drawing on the right. It's using an iPad and Procreate and dropping in color manually. So there are various ways. I think one of the questions was, how do you add color to your drawings, or how do you add shadow? There are various ways to bring in your kind of rendering, to bring in your shadows. In this example, what you're seeing is a SketchUp model export, essentially me trying hard to find what is the perfect view and getting that view to match with a photograph, which, for example, if this was the back or base photograph, I find a view that fits perfectly on this photograph. And then you can export your render, you can export your shadows, and it will fit perfectly to your view. So there's a lot of trial and error here, and it's the preliminary process, or kind of the preliminary part of your drawing, which is the most important, in my opinion, where you are composing your drawing in a very rough and ready way. So you can see there's a slight variation actually in the angle, because it's trial and error, as I said. And the notion that the drawing is never finished, something we get told a lot, or you might have heard, and that is 100% true. On the left is actually a drawing that I quote unquote finished for my part 2 in first year at masters, but on the right is a drawing that I just developed the same drawing into something even more crazy, kind of continuing that narrative. So I think these are all very important concepts. Another thing, now we're kind of zooming into these giant drawings, is to embrace the imperfections. And this ties into a point I was mentioning earlier, where you will inevitably have points in your drawing where you are not going to be doing things completely accurately, and that's the beauty of the tracing process, as I mentioned. So
Sorry, Hamza, there's a question that came through from Bella Blessing, and they said, I never used Procreate for rendering, but that sounds like something to try. And then they asked, for the refugee camp, did you use a brush since the walls look kind of textured?
Yeah, good questions. Sorry if I confused anyone, but I didn't render with Photoshop, if we're referring to render as the process of adding kind of color and texture. With Procreate and my iPad and the tablet, I was only adding in the line drawings. So I was only adding in the raster, and I'll come on to the whole raster versus vector, because it's very important here. I was using that just to do the line drawings. In terms of the textures, for example, what you're seeing, there's a cool thing that you get from actually overlaying a color drop on top of a photograph. So what you're seeing here is actually the photograph that I was tracing, but there's aspects of the walls that are mottled and textured in this way. I kept them in there. There are areas where I obviously took out texture and kept it. I think there's all sorts of playful things you can do there. But also, I'm sure if you guys have used Photoshop, you know you can add texture in just by, dropping and overlaying and multiplying, or, soft lighting in any photograph or any texture. So there's various ways you can do it. Scale is another really important thing here to remember. Obviously, the foreground and the background, as Eric was showing, certain things are going to need more detail, obviously, because they're at the front, and certain things are going to need less detail because they're at the back. But nonetheless, if you're able to draw the person's vision to the fore and the background, you're creating a very, very rich drawing with depth, which makes drawing powerful. Nuances is an incredibly important part of your drawings as well, and it ties again into the idea of what you trace and what you choose to trace and what you choose to leave out and what you add into your drawing. So, for example, these vehicles were just the right photograph. It might take you hours to find the right photograph, guys. So you spend time finding the right photograph to complete your composition, bring it in, trace over it. It doesn't always have to be a model, because I would never have been able to get, this typical Palestinian van with a very genuine number plate without really looking for the perfect photo. The things like rust and all these things, they're a mixture of me adding my own details in and also, using what's there. So nuances really make your drawing, give your drawing character. And as you see over here, I didn't even hold back from the Arabic lettering on the hoarding. So it's a really exciting process, although it seems daunting. When you're in this world, it's bloody exciting. And as I mentioned, characters, Eric had shown his amazing characters. Make sure you're very intentional with your characters. Make sure you're choosing the right people to inhabit your vision. For example, my vision was to create a kind of self-sustaining, kind of self-build community, people who were self-sufficient, and that involved a lot of ad hoc building, kind of procedures by the locals. So what we have here is a local man who is operating a very kind of ad hoc crane system, and that will sell the vision which I was very keen to sell. So be intentional with your characters, 100%. Draw your own characters, as we said, either through a photograph or even getting your friend to do the pose you want them to do. And this is the, for example, the drawing that is being developed further, and I'm talking about micro composition now. You have the macro composition, which is the entire composition of the drawing, but micro composition refers to actually now the details. Always be cognizant of what you're putting in your drawing and why you're putting it in there. And a very interesting thing to bear in mind as well is to make sure your drawing or design language is consistent. If you're envisioning a kind of a perfectly modern contemporary kind of architectural vision with glazing and all sorts of modernist aspects to it, you're not going to use an industrial kind of vernacular or these kind of proper factory like design aesthetics. You're going to match exactly what your design concept is, and that you should reflect that in your drawings all the way down to the minor details, to the way in which the antennas and the actual the details of the stands of these antennas are. It should match your style and your design. Something Eric was mentioning as well. Another huge thing to remember is another thing that people might believe is a illegal thing to do or something that is distasteful, but copy and paste is a good friend of yours when doing drawings this complex. Try to make use of the same components, especially vector components, and try to find ways to build up the detail using components you already have and you've already designed. Especially with your characters. I think you saw from my drawing, you can see from my drawing and Eric's drawings as well, depending on how he's done it, but I definitely have copy and pasted characters, because you'd be silly to maybe do 100 characters where not everyone's going to see every single character. And this is a very important image, because if you look at the bottom of this image, you can see bold, clean vector lines. Excusing this clothed line, these are all vectors. This is actually from the SketchUp export. There's moments of drawing in from Illustrator, and there's moments, if you see in the background, where I've actually drawn in from Photoshop. The vector versus raster thing, to quickly summarize that, is the idea that I was using vectors for the foreground because on Illustrator, because that is where people's eyes are going to be more focused on. Therefore, the detail needs to be a lot more refined. And in the background, I used very, very rough raster lines, i.e. Photoshop, because no one is going to be able to tell the fact that, look how crap these windows are. They're like little circles, which this is really rough line work. But we're talking of a really large image and being very efficient with your time. And so what I'm going to quickly do is show you the actual Photoshop file for this image, so you have an idea of this whole compositional layering technique I'm talking about. So if you can see this, Eric, yeah?
Yeah, we can see this. Thank you.
Okay.
Diane added that love the rawness that came out from hand drawing.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Diane. So what you can see here is the photograph. This is the photograph I traced. and I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm actually proud, and I'm actually, I take pride in being able to reveal sort of the myths that a lot of people feel are behind drawings. There is a huge. You should never feel ashamed of tracing, because there's a huge level of skill involved in tracing properly and tracing correctly. And as I said many times in this presentation, making the drawing your own and kind of introducing your own details and elements. So what you see here is a very, very important step in this process, where I have found my perfect view for the SketchUp. For the SketchUp model exports. All these white areas are SketchUp line exports of the view I really wanted to get. If you remember from my presentation, this is what I had modeled in SketchUp. And then I'd taken this and brought it into a photograph. And because I spent a lot of time making sure my view matched my photograph to end up with a very strong kind of visual composition. At this stage, the next step is to, just for clarity, is to bring in the line work. So this is bringing in the line work of the model, of the actual 3D model, but also the grueling task of doing the vector line drawing of all of the details. Now, if there are any questions of how you do these kind of how you end up doing such crazy details, we can get into answering them if it's not already self-evident that it's just hard bloody work and blood and sweat and tears. This is a crucial stage of you adding in your lines, and I am almost ashamed to say that this is all vector lines on Illustrator. It took a very long time, but the effect was worth it. I ended up with drawings that I'm probably the most proud of. So there is no real kind of myth there. That's literally Illustrator tracing on top. But as I said, choosing what to bring in, choosing what to hide. And then there's another layer. If you missed that, I'll do it again. So taking it out, bringing it in, another layer of Illustrator lines that I've brought in. Actually, I believe these might be in the beginning of the raster, the Photoshop lines. Yes, so these are actually not Illustrator lines. These are Photoshop lines. So these, as you see, they're a lot more rough, these lines, because as I said in the previous slides, no one is going to pay too much notice of these details. But in terms of the full composition, it's hugely effective. And then it's just a matter of building up that detail slowly and surely. So here's the next layer and the final layer. And because this is a huge file, my laptop is struggling. And there is the final layer. So you can see it's a long process. And then the next stage for this is to bring in your color. And if you were going to bring in, I think the color is, again, a very scary process. But in my case, I first brought in the renders, and the question about shadows, which was asked. You can see I've exported the actual materiality and color with shadows. So I'm bearing in mind where my shadows will be casted and bringing in the render. And at the same time, I won't go through that, but I essentially went in with a wand tool and added color to everything. So it's a bloody long process, but it gives you remarkable results. And that is it from me. I think we're all bang on time again. So
wow, perfectly on time. That's great. And just wanted to add, just reading through some of the comments, we have Zain, not to mention that it takes an abundance of patience. Rocky says this is mind-blowing. And then Zain once again says, absolutely love the hanging clothes, very fitting to the local character.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Zain is actually, I believe she is Palestinian, so it was great to have her insights on the actual drawing, because she's on Instagram as well. So yeah, nice to hear from you, Zain, and thanks everyone else. I think, look, it'll be a good time to open up some more general questions now. And we purposefully left this, guys, so that we have half an hour questions. So let me take a sip of water and let's get straight into it. I'm going to go a little bit further back, Eric,
Yeah, sure.
some of the earlier questions, and we can go that way. So, guys, yeah, if you have your questions, drop them in now. We'll try to get them all in. The first one, Eric, if you could start on, is by. Sorry, guys, if I missed your question, just comment it again. But I'm going to start with. Diane Ladiocan says, what laptop do you use in your workflow, or do you use PC in doing these drawings?
I was not a very tech savvy person back when I was doing my part two. That's for sure. So I was running everything off a laptop, but and then halfway through I had to get a new one, or you're either using university, like what they have in uni, which is very helpful, but that tends to be a struggle because you have to come in super early, try and claim a computer before one person renders on 20 computers. So I think, yes, definitely a good tip and a very good question for whoever's intending to do some beautiful drawings in the future. Get a good laptop, get a good computer. It's worth the investment for the future.
100%. I'll add to that as well that you are going to struggle to do these drawings with a machine that is not powerful. So yeah, you may want to make sure you get a machine with high RAM, a machine with high memory capabilities. Ideally, you want to be on a PC, I think, because you're going to generally get better results on a PC. Because yes, these drawings are very large. You're going to have to be jumping between your 3D modeling, your your vector programs, your CAD programs. You need to be on a strong machine for these drawings, for sure. Tahir asks, Tahir Manga says, how was your workflow when working on the drawings?
So I think modeling the proposal, I'd work on it throughout the year. So obviously the architecture starts to be developed, but it's about composing it into the view. So I would have had a master plan and everything developed through that during that period. But you also learn and develop your drawings through modeling and also through doing the drawings itself. So the process of learning and developing a proposal doesn't ever stop. So I think there's always moments where you're modeling and then you make sure that towards the end of the day you can hit the render button or export lines before you go to bed. That's about, I guess, being somewhat efficient without really wasting that time. And it's also about knowing when to trace your material and when it's worth using a model and when it's worth tracing. And tracing is, to a degree, I guess, a sort of mindless activity, but the precursor to it is where you need to really concentrate on finding the right image. But the beauty of tracing is that in that time you can use your brain to sort of plan the next step. Do you plan the next drawing? Do you think about what to model next? Do you think about the color of what it could be while you're tracing it? So I guess it's like just trying to be efficient with your time and knowing the constraints of a computer model. And also to add on the previous question, I think modeling cleanly is very important because you can obviously reduce the size of your file and ensure that the lines you export come out of your model.
Just on that last comment, Eric, I'm going to give a big top tip to people. If you're on SketchUp, bloody make use of that 3D warehouse. That 3D warehouse is a beast. You can get models that, you can get components that are already modeled, bring them into your drawings and, add them to your crazy models. In terms of workflow, Tahir, I think I went quite deep into workflow with showing you the my presentation and Photoshop. I would just emphasize that first collage or the first kind of image, the overall composition of what you want to show, whether that's a collage, whether that's a sketch, whether it's both. It should be both. I think, sketch your vision, then try to get a collage to work, and then start to bring in all the technical aspects. That's so important. A lot of people just think they're in the 3D model and they're like, all right, where's the view? There's the view. All right, export, boom, Photoshop. All right, let me add, oh, it doesn't look good. Oh, it looks shit. And then you're back in this process of like, oh, what, I have to go find a new view or something. Plan your view rigorously, I would say, and your workflow will be smooth. Sage says, how do you work out the line widths after modeling?
The line widths?
Yeah, I guess I guess that means the line weights.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I guess it depends on the scale in which you're going to do the drawing, whether it's at A3, whether it's at double A0, or whatever it might be. And then the beauty of actually, exporting this line work or doing it in vectors, that you can always adjust the line weight as you go on in the proposal. So I think that depends on format, whether it's physically or on screen, especially in this day and age where currently I'm sure a lot of architectural students are doing the tutorials and presenting online, that it's a different format when you're presenting digitally. So do you actually thicken the lines a bit more? Is presentation format predominantly now landscape because of the size and shape of our screens? And it just depends on the media and the scale in which you're doing these. And yeah, well, I'm sure you got something to add to that as well, Hamza, right?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think I'll also just say that you will no doubt know about line weights. I think if it's a technical question, it depends, as Eric said, depends on what your, where your output is. If you're exporting a 3D model, you're often going to end up with a flat. You're going to end up with a standard kind of line weight, because you don't have, as far as I know, the capability of decide line weights from 3D model exports. You can obviously decide that in a 2D CAD program like AutoCAD or MicroStation, because you set those in your layers already, they're inbuilt. So it depends how you're exporting stuff. If you're exporting out from a 3D model, you're going to add that to your post-production, your Vectorworks or your CAD format, and you're going to change it, as Eric said, manually. I think the fact that you are kind of cognizant of line weights is the most important thing, because you can affect that and change that as you go. For example, in the drawings I was doing, I was not changing line weights kind of through CAD software. I was doing it through my actual Procreate drawing size. So it's a great question. As long as I think hopefully that should answer it, but as long as you're cognizant of line weights in any medium you're using, you should be on track. I hope that answers the question. I think Eric definitely did. But would it be, no, we're missing that. Okay, next question. So hopefully that would have answered the earlier questions. Okay, so Diana asks, I think this one's to you, Eric. Your drawings are full of wonder and imagination, but when you were doing them at uni, did you think about working at a traditional architecture practice and applying these skills there?
So when I was at uni, I didn't even think about practice in any way, shape, or form. I think when you're in uni, you just have to remember that life in uni, despite architecture being a very long course, 7 to 8 years or potentially 10 to qualify, that your rest of your life in architectural practice is the next 30, 40, 50 years, or whatever it might be. So if you put it into that context, architectural education is short. So definitely make the most out of it when you can, and just embrace the creative freedom you have, and indulge in your individual interests and what you're learning at that time, because you have got years and years of doing door schedules for the rest of your life or whatever it might be. So yeah, I just kind of went for it. And yeah, it wasn't, I think in architecture it's a strange course as well. It's never a really tick boxing exercise, or it's about, I remember my tutor telling me that if you knew what you're going to do the next day, you might as well not get up, right? So it was very much about just exploring as I went along and learning day by day, and just producing and knowing that you're growing and learning day by day, right? But yeah.
Another thing interesting on that topic is actually these skills that you learn from doing this, although they might not be, exactly directly replicable in your practice, the technical skills you're learning are immense, and you can apply them not just to your practice in a traditional architecture firm, but as Eric knows with his, I don't know if I can announce it or anything, but maybe you can if you have time or if you want to. You can apply it to all sorts of different opportunities that you can open up for yourself, just with general illustration, with graphic design. So I think it's a good question, Diana, but there's something a lot broader going on here when you start to enter into the realms of doing these showpiece drawings. Eric, are you able to announce?
I'm not too sure, but I have been working with a very prolific and amazing animation director, and he's releasing a film out this year. And I just had the opportunity to work with him to develop some city work and concept art, and for this amazing animation that's coming out hopefully in the summer. And yeah, stay tuned. It should be very exciting. But what Hamza said is very interesting, and he really does address this in his podcasts about multidisciplinary and architects and within the profession delving into different realms. And it really is a profession that's very multidisciplinary. So all the skills you learn and develop, you can definitely apply it to illustration, animation, set design, or whatever else you might think of or entering or have an interest in the future.
Definitely. Thanks, Eric. Yeah. So guys, if just to remind you, if you want to check out the podcast that I did with Eric on the Two Worlds Design podcast, the link is in the description. You can open that in a new tab. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube as well. And yeah, I'll probably be doing a new episode with you, Eric, to officially announce this amazing news.
That'd be amazing.
So awesome. So I've got another question. So by Jamil Dossa says, more of a general question. Now that you've both finished your part twos, what do you miss most about the experience? Good question.
Go ahead, Hamza.
Why? You can't think of anything straight away?
No, I'm just saying. I guess it's quite fresh, right? In the sense
Good
that.
point. Yeah, I guess I am a very competitive person. I guess I miss the competition of being in architecture school. It might sound a bit crazy for some people, but I like it. I guess I would, if I was to go back, I would take. I mean, hindsight is a bitch, right? Sometimes, if you have all these kind of insights at this moment, you wish you could have applied them before. So if I was doing part two again, I think my work would have been, I would have probably focused a lot more on making the most out of my projects in terms of narrative. I think I was a lot focused in my part two with just the technical aspects and just making sure I get, a high grade. So there's a lot of lessons I've learned and a lot of things I kind of would maybe do different. I mean, I have no proper regrets in that sense, but I do miss the university kind of process and really taking pride with narrative. Narrative is a beautiful thing, and once you realize actually there's no judgment, and Tahir, who's here as well, hopefully I did a little kind of crit thing with him, and we talked about this notion of being confident in your vision, and university being the playground for that. It's unreal once you realize that you have complete freedom, no matter what your tutors say. You have complete freedom, free will to explore any projects, any crazy ideas, any narrative, obviously being respectful of the people who know more than you. So yeah, I miss kind of being imaginative with narratives, for sure. You don't really get much of that in practice.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm just reading through the question again. Like, now that you've both finished your part twos, what do you miss about the experience? And I guess for me, it's that wholehearted self-indulgence. I think the moment you finish part two and you find a job and you do your part three and you're working practice, you realize that your time starts to become a bit more limited in where you can, delve into those kind of interests, whether it's after work or on the weekend or wherever it might be. Whereas when you're back in uni, you think, oh my God, this is not going to end. I'm still day on day, and my weekend is for my own project. But actually looking back, you had all the time in the world to think about your own project and to really draw for it and to develop it. And I think in a crazy way, that's kind of why I miss the wholehearted day by day self-indulgence of something that's interesting and amazing. Not that anything that's developing and obviously doing now is not interesting. They're equally interesting because you're growing and learning, whether in real practice or whatever it might be. But in the context of this question, that's what I miss.
Definitely. Do you miss the all-nighters, or did
Definitely
you do
not. Maybe did one or two at best.
Guys, this is the crazy thing Eric talked about in the podcast as well, where he only did one or two all-nighters.
Just because printing issues towards the end, when everyone has to run for the printer.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot of lessons we can learn from you, Eric. So I think one other question coming in is, Zane says, how do you prevent the layers of these complex drawings from becoming convoluting, i.e. difficult to identify where they overlap? Good question.
I think your presentation addressed that quite well, how you are layering it through, right, Hamza?
Yeah, I just want to completely understand the question. So, how do you prevent the layers of these complex drawings from becoming convoluting, i.e. difficult to identify where they overlap? Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it's trial and error, to be honest. I think there's a level of knowing what components you want to bring into your drawing, and how you're going to execute the finish, if that makes sense. So in my case, there was a photograph as the background. There was a model export from SketchUp. There was and then there was my drawings, my tracing on top of the photograph to match all those things together. And then I would pull the photograph away, obviously. And then once you end up with those two primary base things, you can start to add all the crazy details and nuances. So in terms of the foundational base, you've got your trace of your kind of environment, and you've got your model that sits on top. I mean, this is the way I did it. Eric might have a different way he can explain. But yeah, this process can be complicated, as you saw, but I think if you spend, as I said, a lot of time in the beginning process, making sure you're jumping from, for example, you're jumping into the model and you're looking at the view of the model. Yeah, you take a screenshot. You don't export lines. You're just doing it just to check. So you take a screenshot, take that screenshot, overlay it onto the photograph that you've chosen. When you overlay it, you can say, okay, it works. Maybe the perspective or the depth of field is slightly wrong. Let me change the depth of field angle. So you'll go back to your model. You'll adjust it slightly. You'll bring it back. Does it work? Okay, it works perfectly. So with all of these things, you're making your perfect standing point, your starting point. And therefore, when you start to execute the drawing with the line work and all these things, you're more efficient, and you're not kind of complicating it and overlapping. Everything fits basically. So that initial collaging part is very important for me.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that and saying that once you have a very clear vision of what you want to really express and what the key components are, you can start to have that clarity in your head. And I guess you sort that into folders in Photoshop. And I guess one of the very base ones is just knowing what your foreground is, your midground is, and what your background is. And once you really define that, then it becomes so much clearer, because there's a certain information you're portraying in the beginning, in the front, and then there's a certain contextual thing in the background that you're trying to express in right at the back. And once you define those three, midground, background, foreground, it doesn't become so convoluting, and then it becomes a nice layered drawing with a series of information that you're trying to put across.
Great, yeah, great insights there, Eric. I would emphasize the idea of making sure you name your layers, put your things in folders, organize your shit, because that is how you will end up with a potential heart attack later down the line.
Name your layers, not copy 102 of copy 107 or something.
Yes. Thanks, Zane. Great question, guys. You guys are asking brilliant questions, and don't be shy to ask the technical questions, guys. If there's, as Zane did, make the most of Eric being here to ask him these technical things. Hakuto, I hope I'm saying your name right. Pearson says, do you have any tips or suggestions for plugins when exporting line work from SketchUp to Illustrator so that the different elements are separated into layers? Good question. I guess I'll ask it because I don't know if, Eric, you use SketchUp that much, do you? You don't?
No, I don't know.
No. I think well, for what I didn't actually use any plugins for exporting the lines from SketchUp, because actually one of the reasons I like using SketchUp is because it has if you're using SketchUp Pro, you have a very clean export process. It's a very you don't end up with crazy ghost lines and crazy kind of complex issues as you do with, for example, doing Make 2D with Rhino. SketchUp is as you see it, you get what you see type program. So I didn't use any plugins, Hakuto. I just exported straight from Revit, from SketchUp. So I don't actually know. That's a very good suggestion for a plugin, though. If that doesn't exist, that would be an amazing. And I know they use API and open kind of software, so you should contact Autodesk, I believe, and suggest that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the lines being separated, but undoubtedly, I'm sure most of you know, exporting color ID and elements by that makes it a lot easier to fill in the elements that you like as well.
Oh, good. You just reminded me. Good point, Eric. Hakuto, the way of doing what you're suggesting, actually, maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe I spoke too soon. No, it's a good idea. I'm joking. But the way that I think you could do that manually would be literally, you have your model, you've grouped it because you're a very organized modeler. You've grouped your components. Just hide the component of the model you need to hide and export them in increments and name your exports. You'll have to do that anyway. So it's a great question. I think
that's a very good technique too.
Joel asks, how do you know where to model in SketchUp if you did not have the context modeled? Specifically for the last drawing, how do you avoid modeling the surrounding buildings and just trace them in? I've got a bit of ADHD. I might have to read that again. How did you know where to model in SketchUp if you did not have the context modeled? Good question. Very good question. Joel, this comes back to the trial and error thing I was explaining, where you find the view that you want, the killer view. And for me, it was out as if maybe in a helicopter looking down on this entire thing with a really large field of view, so you can get the full view of the vision. Because my whole concept was to display the idea of a urban sprawl, the idea of a new parasitic architecture kind of taking over the existing density of refugee camps. And I was only going to do that with a giant bird's eye view looking down in perspective. So I knew that's the view I wanted. It's a great question, because this is the hardest part, getting these things to match up. So once I found the view I wanted around about in SketchUp, as I said to Zain, I just took a screenshot just for testing, no exports, just screenshot, brought that to my Photoshop file where I'd found the perfect photograph. So I found the perfect photograph first, but I'm not being precious with this photograph. It could change if I needed to, but then I overlay that screenshot with the photograph, and I can then see the model sitting on the refugee camp, if you like. Then I can see where the problems are, or where the angle needs to change, or where the perspective doesn't make sense. And then I come back to the the SketchUp model and make any amendments needed. And then I do that back and forth. If you do that for half an hour, you will end up with the perfect view.
I'd like to add to that this is a tool I literally only discovered recently, and it blew my mind. And it's called Photo Match. So with this amazing tool called Photo Match, it's you import a photo into your 3D file, and you have a few key points of one or two surrounding buildings, and you click the key buildings around to the photo, and it automatically matches the perspective of your actual 3D model to the photo, the flat 2D photo that you have. And that's amazing. Sometimes it doesn't work because it doesn't quite acknowledge it, but when it does, it's pretty accurate.
What software is that on?
That's actually on MicroStation.
So that's on MicroStation.
Yeah, this is literally Photo Match. You put in any aerial photo, you put in your context model and your main building. As long as you have a few reference points, you can always photo match it, which is amazing.
Guys, if anyone is doing, I suppose someone is Googling that right now. If you find the link for that, just post it in the chat so people can get that too. Yeah, great questions, guys. Adam, great to have you, mate. Says many people seem to have a strong drawing style / visual architectural identity. Do you have any advice on finding your own unique way of drawing? Brilliant question. Eric, you take this one to start.
Yeah, so let me read the question one more time. Many people seem to have a strong drawing style, visionary. Do you have any advice on finding it? I think it depends on your project and what you do for the project, you know? Like if your drawing is set in Japan and embraces that culture and has a political position on within that context, then it would really embrace the sort of Japanese style of drawing. And if it's to do with something else, it would I think it takes the form of what your research thesis is. And that way it becomes very focused, very precise, and very like yeah, those are the two words, very focused and precise into what you're trying to do. And it becomes more meaningful because you're not just using a technique or method to kind of express what you're trying to talk about. So I guess in my drawings, they're very much to do with the UK, as I mentioned. So I really borrowed from British illustrators, graphic designers, and painters, and used the colors that they employed and to borrow from them to retain that kind of spirit of drawing.
Amazingly put, Eric. I think this kind of raises a kind of almost a philosophical question, or a very deep question that I think a lot of architecture students wonder about. I wonder about. I still wonder about. But from what I have kind of learned, architectural style is something you should really not worry about, as in having your own style. At all, really. I thought about this, that you shouldn't worry about it until you get to a point where maybe you're starting to establish yourself and you see what you're good at, and then just hone in on that. But even then, I mean, I might be different in this sense. That might be a way you should go, but I have a different view on this, in that I want to be as explorative as kind of add as many kind of style, knowledges of different styles as possible. I want to be able to experiment, try as many different aesthetics as I can, learn as many different aesthetics as I can. I think if you see my Instagram, that's the first thing you'll notice, is how there's completely different drawing styles in every post, because I personally take a lot of pride in trying different drawing styles, as this one was kind of inspired by Eric in some ways, but I brought my own kind of logical, pragmatic vision to it as well. Whereas Eric's drawings are very, exploring much more fictional themes. I think in terms of having advice of finding your own unique way of drawing, that is a great question. Again, in terms of you're not necessarily seeking a style in that sense, but having a unique way of drawing, I think you have to find what you're good at eventually by experimenting as much as you can. And you might realize, I'm really good at hand drawing, or this is where my kind of skill or talent lies, and explore that. I think you might also realize, oh, I'm really good at putting the compositional aspects of drawings together. Explore that. I know some of you here already, I know, some of you, for example, are amazing at, doing abstract drawings. So I think experiment as much as you can. And if you really want to, hone in on something that you feel like you're good at.
No, I agree. I think it's much to do with just you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you can just borrow from the right references. And I'm sure as you go through architectural education and life, that you build up a good bank of references that you love and you get inspired by, and you can always just borrow from them and go, these are the colors I like. I like the composition of this drawing. I like the drawing style of this particular drawing. And you kind of interrogate it, get curious about it, and then you never know, you might use it for a future project in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly. I also say that, through doing so many different types of drawings on my page, I actually, got told by people, oh, this is your style. And I was like, really? That's my style? And I was told that I, have an industrial kind of, I'm not blowing gas up my ass, but I've been told this, but, the idea that, my drawings look like Lebbeus woods. So that style, I realized that is something I really love. So it makes sense that's my style, but I never sought that style. I never tried to have a particular style. I never prescribed myself a style. It just emerged by doing things I loved, out of trying to be as free as I can. So yeah, great question.
And one last thing, and once you keep doing it and you keep repeating it, you start to improve on it day and day, and then that way, I guess it just becomes yours because you're more confident in doing it day by day because it's not the first time you do it, right?
So you agree, Eric, that it's it's all about just exploring as much as you can and being as
Yeah,
free as you can with it.
exploring, but also repetition, practice makes perfect, and putting the time into it, I guess.
Brilliant. I've just been being told by them, but photo merge is on Photoshop and photo merge is on SketchUp. I'll
Is
be
it
googling.
photo merge or photo match? Or okay, fine, let's see.
We'll get into these technical things later, but if yeah, thanks for mentioning
Thank you.
that, Blessing and Robert.
Thank you.
We probably have time for one more question, and Blessing says, following on from Adam, how do you create a visual style for portfolio renders when short on time? Interesting question. Do you want to start this one, Eric?
How do you create a visual style for portfolio renders when short on time? I'm not sure this question is too applicable to me in the sense that I don't think I render much, so I don't plan for that time, or the knowing that technology can hold you back in short periods of time like stresses me out sometimes. But do you
Yeah,
maybe yeah?
I think perhaps Blessing, you're talking about. I assume you're talking about your professional portfolio or your university portfolio. In that, when you want to present a project, there should be a coherent style for each project. In that case, I would say follow the style in which your project already is in, and as Eric said, that your project and your style of your drawings will follow a particular narrative, right? So if you are exploring Japanese tea houses, for example, then it might be a smart thing to introduce that to the kind of ornamentation and the kind of lettering and character styles of your portfolio, or it might just be in the nuances of your drawing, and that's all you need. I think when it comes to portfolios, that can be quite a deep line of questioning where you said, yeah, when presenting and applying for placements. Right. So in the professional world, yeah, I think when you're talking about your portfolio, that can lead us down a rabbit hole because there's so many different ways in which you can present your portfolio. It can be personal, it can be project based, it can be narrative based, it can be, minimalistic, it can be so many things. So I'm not sure I completely get the question when you refer to renders, but if you mean in having a coherent style, I think just choose what you think will be best, whether it's a project-based kind of aesthetic for your portfolio or a kind of an overall concept style for your portfolio. Yeah, we are very punctual, Eric, and
Very
amazing
punctual, yeah.
questions by everyone. Thank you guys so much. If there's any emergency questions, fire away quickly. Otherwise, we will end it there. And I'll just say quickly before we sign out, thank you again to all of you who've tuned in. Thank you to Eric for taking the time to go through this with us. Please, please, please go and check out the links in the description so you can follow my work, so you can follow Eric's work, and you can also tune into the podcast where we go into things a lot more deep about the Bartlett kind of culture. We talk about all sorts of things to do with drawings. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone. And make sure you're tuning in to the rest of the events tonight because they'll be closing tonight. And it's been an incredible weekend. Huge congratulations to all of us at MAD and especially Sana and Gabriel for curating such an incredible event for the MAD Collective. Eric, any final words?
No, thank you everyone for being here, and it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me as well. So
brilliant, guys. All right, take care.
Take care, everyone. Thanks. Bye.